Something is always going to go wrong at your wedding.
The more people that come, the more money you have.
It's the concept of spending that much money on one day. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about marriage versus mortgage.
We're just here to give you our advice.
We're not experts, but we did talk about a lot of the interesting things like relationships with in-laws and financial positions as well.
Quite an interesting conversation, especially about quite a touchy subject. So enjoy.
Yeah, and if you are enjoying, then definitely follow us on all of our social handles. You'll find them in the description, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel.
You know what's been quite an interesting debate as such?
Yeah.
I would say it's more based on people choosing to get married. What's more important? Is it to do the wedding, to do the wedding now in real time, or to get a house and that a priority, to live together or buy a house, whatever that might look like?
Yeah.
Marriage versus mortgage.
Do you think it's a generational thing that's changed?
100%. It's a definite generation thing.
Yeah. I guess from what I've seen online or friends that I've spoken to, it's the concept of spending that much money on one day versus a home that you're going to live in and build out for the next maybe 5 to 10 years, or whether it's your forever home. It's just to try and swallow the cost of what, maybe a couple 100,000, or maybe not 100,000, tens of thousands on your wedding just seems crazy to our generation.
It does. It still happens, which is, we're all for it, by the way. So, we do believe in celebrating.
I love a big wedding.
Yeah, likewise. I love any celebration. I do believe everything should be celebrated. I'm a big believer of that. I love partying.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's in the space that we're in anyway. But at the same time, I know that the rise of costs, the cost of living, more so house property values, etc., is a big factor, but perhaps not the only factor, because I think it's actually become more apparent that people want to live with each other before they get married to see if they actually can live together, firstly, as one option. The other thing I've noticed is it is a generational thing. Coming back to the point that you mentioned, is previously, I guess it was very common for people to get married and quite common for the bride to potentially move in with the groom's family or something along those lines at the home.
Yeah.
And potentially stay there forever. Whereas I think that a lot of the newer generation brides feel a lot more like they need their own space, they want their own space. And actually when they get married, they actually want to move straight out. And I think that's become something I've seen shift, and it's become more apparent that looks like a faster order. So as sooner or closer you're married, the sooner or faster you're trying to get out.
Yeah, and that's why it's probably such a financial burden if you're trying to do both in the same year. Because to your point, if you lived with your in-laws for maybe, say, I don't know, a year or two, and then saved up a little bit more and then moved out, you're spreading the costs of a wedding and then a mortgage.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I guess if you're trying to do it all in 1 year, then naturally you're going to potentially have a lower wedding budget, or you're going to get married a little bit later if you can save up enough by that time, right?
Yeah, we've actually done a lot of weddings with clients that have already had the civil, already moved in together, and then had the reception a few years later.
Yeah.
In some circumstances, some circumstances two.
Yeah.
And I find that quite interesting, and in many ways, I guess it makes sense if you're trying to figure out a compromise in regards to which priority to do things in. But I guess also it comes down to a lot of family pressures. Families will want specific things as well for their children.
So I think family pressures, and also just the couple as individuals, is kind of how maybe traditionally led they on their own views. And a lot of that probably comes from your family and what you've grown up seeing. But equally, you might have one person who's actually like, you know what? No, I think marriage is really significant to me in a different way. And I want to only move in together once we're married, versus others who are of the thought, like you said, where it's like, actually, I want to make sure we can live together before. But then it goes into the debate of, isn't a mortgage a larger kind of financial obligation than getting married? Like, aren't you tying yourself into something? I guess it's different if you're renting, but for those who are actually getting a mortgage and living in together, some would say online, and these are not my views, so don't come for me in the comments, but some would say that if you're tying into a contract and a mortgage together, that's a larger financial responsibility.
Unlike you're married already.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way, before you're married.
Exactly. And so if you're doing it because you want to test out living together, that's harder to break out of than a marriage sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, for many people, they will live together after they're married.
Yeah.
For others, I guess, more so within the last few years, it's become more apparent that it's becoming more normalized, it's happening, and people are more confident or comfortable in that way, where they live together and then decide whether they are going to get married. I meet a lot of people that say, hey, we're getting married. we're either in the process of buying a house or have bought a house already, and then say, look, we don't have as much money because we're paying for the wedding ourselves.
Yeah.
Which my answer is, in many ways, it's the same. It's the same service that you're essentially going to be booking.
What, do they ask for it cheaper?
They do, because sometimes people think that because they're paying for the wedding,
Yeah.
it should be cheaper, which
Versus
doesn't
their
make any sense.
parents.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm not sure where this school of thought came from.
Do you think
I
it's
guess.
like the emotional sell of Nainish? Feel bad for me.
Yeah, but it might do.
But then you're like, you've got a whole house.
Yeah, it's true. Well, look, you don't necessarily need to have everything that you may want for a wedding. And I think this is coming back to a previous topic we've touched on is people see things on social media mainly that they never thought they wanted, and then they want it.
Yeah.
And then they ask for it, and then naturally, when you want more specific things, the cost tends to add up.
Yeah.
I do believe, where possible, when people are paying for their own wedding, they are going to just get exactly what they want and what they need.
Yeah.
And in many ways, I've never been so pushy on telling clients, listen, you need all this extravagant stuff, and you just need what you want. And it generally does come down to that. I think people have now got more of a voice than perhaps previously, where they are saying, look, this is it, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I want, this is how I'm going to do it. Whereas previously, there was kind of like families saying, well, look, you're getting married, it has to be a big wedding, you're the first daughter, you're the first son, whatever that might look like. Which probably is still in the case now, but future generations 100% is shifting.
Yeah, because I think everyone thinks about, well, when I have kids, I'm going to do it really different.
Yeah.
But it's where you said it there, that when it's your own money, you're going to spend it differently. It comes down to, have you seen that thing on TikTok? And everything I reference is on TikTok, where if you're paying for dinner, you're going to get tap water, and you're going to not order the most expensive thing or not get the most expensive bottle of wine. But if your parents are paying, you're going to get that bottle of water, and you're going to get the expensive meals. And so I think that's probably follows through into the wedding side of things as well, that when you see it physically leaving your account, you're going to be a lot more conscious and budget way harder.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, have you ever heard of, someone tried to explain this to me in quite interesting terms, but it's kind of like community giving. So the idea of actually having big weddings, especially within, for example, Asian communities, when you had like 500 people to 1,000 people attending wedding ceremonies, which was quite common, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years back. The idea of community giving is people are coming to celebrate your wedding, or they're coming to your wedding, but they're coming with a gifted envelope. They're giving you money. So in theory, the more people that come, the more envelopes you get, the more money you have. It kind of gives you a future head start in regards to, just wishing you the best and trying to live your future, whether that looked like getting a house at that point or whatever that might be.
Yeah.
And in many extents, if you've got more people at a wedding and you've got the concept of community giving, in theory, are you making more money to actually then say, cool, I've got a deposit here potentially, or something along the line, or going toward the costings. But what you do see...
Do you know what this is looking like? Is a profit and loss account.
It does.
Where you're basically like, right, this is how much I spent, this is how much I made on my wedding, and my net positive or net negative.
Some people do this. They have a book.
Oh yeah, everyone does.
Yeah, when they get a gift from whichever way it looks like, from a ceremony, party, birthday, whatever that might look like, it's kind of like, all right, well, look, this person gave me this amount. It's fair that I do, the same back. But, I never knew this. I did recently figure this all out when someone explained this to me, and I was a bit like, what? Is this why it was like that? Is that...
I guess no one knows why it's like that. You just know that you need to give, because we've grown up hearing parents say, oh, well, they gave so-and-so for ours, and so we need to match it or do more for theirs. Like, you can never go less. And I always wondered, like, how do they keep track? And now we're all realising, oh, they have spreadsheets.
But now, how do they do it if they're reducing the numbers? So, like... In theory, that's why probably people of the younger generation are kind of more panicky and be like, well, you know what, actually, we're only having, 50 people or 100 people at our wedding.
Yeah.
We're not going to get as much community giving as such.
We're getting the profit.
We've got to get the house first and then worry about that later. I don't know, just a school of thought.
Also, and it comes on to guest list, right? Like, that's probably why parents are so, okay, you need to have a certain guest list because so-and-so invited so-and-so and us to their wedding and things like that. And with the guest lists going down, and obviously community giving going down, but also parents are probably, that's why there's such a big divide, because couples want a smaller wedding, parents need to return the favour per se.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, how are you going to do that? Because technically they've then financially gifted us something and we need to return it somehow.
Well, I think some parents are also for it. They're for kind of like understanding that, times have changed. It's not so relevant for maybe every single person to attend a wedding that's not connected with someone's life.
Yeah.
And I think that intimacy has come, and a lot of it's probably shaped with the direction of social media to some element of things, where people care about who's in that room majority of the time. People care about, their content, their social media. They're a lot more...
They just care. Yeah.
That's it. They care much
do.
more.
They're very happy to voice their opinion because their opinion gets listened to a lot more. Like I
Yeah.
remember even when parents tell stories, it's like, well, I didn't say anything because no one was going to listen to it. So
Yeah.
one, I just didn't bother because I didn't have the confidence to because it wasn't the done thing. But also two, if I said it, I just get shut down.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess our generation, everyone talks a lot more, but parents also listen a lot more.
Yeah.
Hence why there's probably a lot more conversations that take place. And I've seen so many more couples who their wedding planning journey has just become so much longer because of these things like the guest list sizes and the budgets and how many people do you want there and what's the wedding going to look like. Those initial conversations are taking so much longer than the actual speaking to vendors and booking them in place.
Yeah, I guess it's also quite interesting to understand, like, maybe sometime what the parents would want at this stage, because I guess it's that kind of fine crossroad of you got the younger generation saying, look, cool, it's a more of a priority potentially to get a house. Parents maybe feeling like, actually, you know what, in this day and age, maybe it is more important to get the house first.
Yeah.
But allowing that to happen, I guess, is quite interesting. I do speak to a handful of parents, a handful of naturally of clients, and they talk about their journeys of doing specific things, but it feels more accepted and more normalized, I guess.
Yeah.
To some extent. Some family perhaps are probably still against it. What's the consensus generally within your friends or demographic that you've been speaking to? Is
I
there
think
any
it
direction?
really varies, and I wouldn't say that I found a trend as of yet because a lot of my friends or people that I'm seeing or the couples that we're speaking to, especially if they're first in their generation,
Yeah,
parents are still not fully sure. You're finding that the youngest siblings, or if you're second or third
yeah,
to get married out, your cousins, you're doing things a little bit more differently. Whereas for the first one, it's still very much, well, this is how we did it back in our day. So I think parents are also evolving and learning as they go. But I guess something that I want to touch upon, especially when it came to the marriage side of things, where you're saying you're seeing social media and you're saying, well, actually, I want all of these things at my wedding and it's going to be more expensive. I also think that's happening with houses or flats,
yeah,
where you're seeing on social media that everyone has a certain lifestyle or lives in like a skyrise building, wherever it may be. And then you want that. So naturally, your costs are also increasing there
yeah.
because of social media. So I think it's having, this is what you want, it's up here, but your budget is maybe just this much of a pot and you don't know how to distribute it because social media is telling you to have both.
It's true. It's quite daunting, the thoughts of actually what social media probably shaped a lot of people to maybe feel like
Yeah.
they want, which maybe they might have not have wanted if they didn't see it.
Yeah. It's so true because even I think about it sometimes where like when I have my personal views on marriage versus mortgage and which order I'd want to do them in, I always wonder, I'm like, is it shaped through my parents, through social media? Because I don't know if it's innately what I do think part of it is innately
Yep.
what I think, but you're right, it's got all of these different interactions that maybe if I didn't see certain things on social media, I would think differently.
You know what? It would be quite interesting to ask and get a poll result of actually saying what is more important, especially for bride and groom, to see
Yeah.
whether they value the actual the wedding or the mortgage in comparison.
Comment down below if you are prioritizing your wedding budget or the amount that you're putting aside for a house, because I think that's a really interesting thing to
It'll be
know.
good to see, because I guess that'll shape the narrative of that journey as well. And like, even things like getting married on, finance potentially, for example, right?
Yeah.
These are all kind of options in some extent. I've had people in the past ask us, do you take like finances? There are ways that we can do it. And we've got split
Yeah.
payments for clients if it works for them. So in some extent, some people, to answer again, one of the previous topics that you mentioned about trying to do them both at the same time can be perhaps quite expensive. If you're trying to buy a house and get married within
Yeah.
the same window, is knowing that you got some potential possibilities to finance it or how that might look for someone.
Yeah.
We're interested.
And I think we touched upon this separately, not on the podcast as well, just around for a couple when they're getting married, the journey of speaking to suppliers or finding that house is the most important thing to them. But for you as suppliers, you're running a business. And so for them, a client is a very important client, but they are also one of many. How do you find it as a supplier, things like split payments, just from a business perspective, right? Because you can understand the emotional side of it, but actually it can sometimes be practical versus emotional.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on how far apart, I guess, payments can be. It depends on cash
Yeah.
flow, what kind of season it's in to some extent. But generally speaking, I'm usually quite flexible with clients. If
I
they
think
say,
people should be.
yeah, it's ultimately, the aim for us is so long as we've got paid before the event date, ideally a
Yeah.
month beforehand is where we position ourselves.
Yeah.
But of course, if a client's saying, look, this is what we would like to do, is that okay with you? That's fine. And I've always opted for like lower deposits. I've never asked a client, hey, you've got to pay me, X amount, for example, I always find that actually asking for a lower commitment is easier to
Yeah.
some extent, and it's kind of less daunting for someone. Like it's a lot to deal with when you're meeting people
Yeah.
and they're spending, a lot of money, and then you're kind of asking for a huge amount of it.
Yeah.
You're making them feel to some extent maybe uncomfortable. Whereas the last thing I'm trying to do is make someone feel a bit like,
Yeah.
I don't know whether I want to do this or spend this much money at this kind of project now. But on the flip side of that, I have other clients that say, hey, I want to pay you all now and get you out of the way and carry on with the expenses and just move on.
Yeah.
So I guess people have got their own way, because in a weird way, I like to kind of try my best to, all right, cool, this is a cost, get rid of it and
Yeah.
carry on.
Have
And it's
you-
kind of signed off.
Have you heard of girl math? Do you know what that is?
No.
So girl math is a concept where if you've already paid for it, that doesn't exist anymore. Like now, anything that you spend
Really?
beyond
Okay.
that, and I don't think I've explained it in the best way, but it comes down into, say, holidays, for example.
Yeah.
So if you spent £500 on flights for something, and then your holidays in 6 months, and then at the 3 month mark you're going to book hotels, you're not actually thinking about the 500 you spent. You'll happily spend another 500 because it's like girl math. That
Okay,
now
fine.
is already out of my account, so it's fine. As opposed
Yeah.
to spending £1,000 on that one day.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
interesting how, I don't know if that applies to weddings.
Well, to be honest with you, it probably does, because if you get all the bills at the same time for a wedding,
Yeah.
it's going to be a huge amount. You're going to feel it. Whereas if it's broken down and you've
Yeah.
structured it in such a way of cross payments over, for example, say today you've chosen a wedding date exactly from now 1 year away.
Yeah.
You've got, let's just for argument's sake, you've got 12 suppliers.
Mm-hmm.
You pay each supplier month by month. Essentially, you're going to lose the same amount of money.
Yeah.
But with that theory, it makes sense. It's easier to digest. And in many ways, I guess it makes sense, because sometimes people say that. They say, look, I want to book this, but the deposits for everything are amounting quite high. Can we pay you a deposit later? I'm saying, look, just pay me a minimum deposit now if you want it. That's fine. You
Yeah.
can pay me that, like the actual deposit a little bit later if it's easier for you. That's fine.
Yeah. Because for you, the point is just,
Secure the booking. Yeah, I agree. I think that for us, it's like if they don't book the DJ, then there's a possibility someone else might book
Exactly.
the other DJ, and then we're back to potentially not having a booking. In theory, that's the smartest play to make. For a bride and groom coming into the game now, spreading your costings or actually accounting for it in specific terms or Excel terms or anything along those lines is something a lot of people
Returns.
don't do.
can use that.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think that's the main thing. Anytime we speak to suppliers or couples,
Yep.
even just getting payments and making
Yep.
payments, that's like the biggest nerve-wracking factor when it comes to planning a wedding, because you'll book a supplier, you get along with them really well, and you know you want them and they have that buy-in, but you might even get that deposit, but chasing that final payment is the trickiest thing.
Yeah. But having a system like you've got for a bride and groom it makes life a lot more effortless. It makes them know what the right thing to kind of calculate or factor in.
Yeah.
And having that, like from the on-site or the beginning of your journey, will make your life less daunting when you're getting married. So you enjoy the build-up. You're not actually stressing every month, knowing I don't know what's happening. Because people, especially people from our team, will understand that like a month beforehand. Sometimes when you're approaching clients for the final invoice, etc., and they're not always getting back to you, I think it's overwhelming, because I think a lot of suppliers are probably coming to that client to say, hey guys, and that's when it becomes quite stressful. And then when you're talking to that client during that time frame, you can feel the unease.
Yeah.
Whereas in other circumstances, some other clients, like you mentioned, if they've paid you in advance, when you meet them, they're completely at ease.
They're chilled.
And so are we. So it's a win. Everyone's happy.
I think that's the thing as well, because like you're saying, 1 month before the wedding, you're probably in panic mode of, okay, have I booked everything? Is
Yeah.
everything fully tied? You're also getting chased for payment. It's also that emotional side of, I'm getting married. Like, regardless of, I think, whether or not you've already moved out at that point. If you haven't moved out, it's just an emotional thing
Yeah.
to think, actually, in 30 days' time, I'm not going to be living in my childhood home, perhaps. But even if you are already living with your partner, you just know that there's this whole pressure around getting married and everyone showing up for you in a certain way, and you want it to go as seamlessly as possible. I think
Yeah.
that's where it comes from. It's not that you're not excited, it's just that you've spent all this money and you have everyone you love and want on your wedding day. You just want it to run smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
there's that emotional side to weddings, which I guess other industries don't touch on when it comes to making a payment for
Yeah.
anything else. Or if you get an invoice, it's like, yeah, I'll pay it whenever. But you
Yeah.
don't have that emotional side of things that you do with weddings.
Yeah, I guess depending on what kind of client you're dealing with, or sometimes when it's the guys versus the girls, I guess I haven't necessarily noticed a huge amount of difference. If I'm honest with you, it seems like kind of balance in regards to who is approaching us, who's
A bit
making
equality.
decisions. Much. Yeah, it's true. The guys sometimes are the one that are dealing with the financial situations, etc. Is what I find, or calling me to try to negotiate the deals or just to finalize specific things. But it's quite an interesting, quite an
I think that's
interesting.
a really smart thing that couples do, and you've briefly touched upon it there, that when you're getting married, split the
Yeah,
responsibilities for certain
yeah.
suppliers. So if you know that, for example, a DJ is more important to you, or
Yeah,
stereotypically a makeup artist may be more important to a bride, take charge of that side and
yeah,
then
yeah.
shove off what you're not as fussed about, because it will make your planning journey together so much easier, whether you are, I don't know, bride and groom, bride and bride, groom and groom, whatever it
Yeah.
may be. If you have different interests, make sure that you split the suppliers accordingly and who's going to be the main contact for who.
Yeah, it's true. You know, sometimes it does definitely work. I think for me, I know what I would want to kind of champion, and I think naturally for bride, they're going to know what they want to champion. So
Yeah.
it does help when you kind of delegate it or having that conversation in advance.
Yeah.
And again, it's just future thinking, future planning. I think what a lot of couples don't really do is actually think about like the journey of it, but break it down into like a monthly basis and understanding to some extent, like, you know, what their cash flow is going to be like
Yeah, they
within
don't.
windows.
But it's hard to, especially if you're not. I know some couples that I've spoken to who like live on Excel, or like maybe they're in
Yeah.
consulting or in finance, and for them that's second nature. It comes so natural to them. But for those who aren't, it's you're basically doing a project
Yeah.
management role, and if that isn't your skill set, you're going to really struggle
Yeah,
with it
but even event coordinators, those kind of things can help with this
for sure.
to some extent as well. And I think the other thing I think I always give advice to people is to say that if you are unsure on what your budget is, just book the very minimum with
Yeah.
everyone that you need, and then basically have an agreement or have a conversation with them, you know, a few months before their event and say, actually, you know what, we have got a bit more extra budget. Can we do X, Y, Z?
That's really smart.
That way, because I never try to bulk book a client into things anymore. It's like, look, what do you want?
Yeah.
If you want to add it later, then come in and add it later. It's fine.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does. It's easier, especially for those that don't know exactly what they want, or more importantly, if they don't know how much they are going to spend on everything overall. In which case, you can kind of tick off your vendor list and say, cool, I've got everything I need at minimum.
Yeah.
You know, you've got everything that ticks the box as such. And then a month or two before your event,
Yeah.
wherever that budget lines up and whatever is more of a priority for you. And it works for us with the band. The band's booked a lot more last minute because they're added on to a package
Makes
that's
sense.
already done. And then they see it and they'll be like, all right, I've got a bit more budget. I want to do this. So
And also because then they have, say, 12 to 18 months to make that decision. Because what you don't want to do is make a decision and then regret it for the next 10 months.
Yeah,
Oh my God, I booked too much.
Right.
But that's such a nice way to do it. And I guess if more suppliers were like that, it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
To say, we can do the base. And then if you let me know at minimum a month before, like most likely the month of, it can be a bit harder and like we need to manage our own logistics. But at least a month before, just let us know your add-ons. And then that's your cut off. And it's also probably nice because you check in with the couple anyways about a month before just to see how things are going. If they've got a coordinator, you'll get in touch with them, so it kind of reignites that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, the flexibility is the key for I guess a future generation. I guess what we've done and what I've seen other people have done successfully is have flexibility, is adapt to each person's needs and kind of just see what works.
I always think, I don't know if nowadays couples and the generation, which is my generation, I think we overthink too much. I don't think we're actually as flexible, because when I look at maybe stories that I've been told from parents or cousins who got married maybe a decade or two ago, they always say that things were done for them, but it also made it slightly easier because you just didn't overthink, like, okay, a house and then a wedding and this is the cost and this is social media, and they enjoyed it a little bit more. Versus now, I think where the generation wants to plan everything down to a T, it can sometimes actually cause more stress. Like if you overthink and nitpick every single little detail, which you maybe didn't do before, like every single supplier conversation, if you want to go into the depths and nitty gritty of everything, naturally that's going to cause more questions and stress that maybe you didn't have back in the day.
Yeah, that's true. Sometimes you just got to enjoy the moment, right? You
It's a fine line, because I understand the benefit of knowing all the details, and especially if you're spending that much money, you want to know all the details. But like you said, can you also enjoy it?
Yeah, it's true. Sometimes you see bride and groom at their own party stressing. Sometimes I guess they might be stressing for good reasons and it might not have been, you know, planned or gone exactly how they wanted. Other times I think it's sometimes the case of potentially trying to manage everything. When it's hard to switch off because people have got specific visions. They have got it. And some people find it difficult just to be like, cool, let's just live in that moment and carry it on. It's only happened a handful of times, but I have seen some people at weddings that have basically taken a lot of the small things very seriously, and it from the outside looks like that it might have altered how they enjoyed that event.
Yeah.
Whereas on the opposite side, sometimes naturally on some events, things might not go to plan, but watching some bride and grooms just champion it and carry on. You know, we've seen cakes fall down, champagne bottles pop, will fall over. Sometimes
Yeah.
it might not be the most comfortable position for a bride and groom to sit right next to it, but you can do one of two things: is laugh or cry.
But I think you're right. Something is always going to go wrong at your wedding. You
Yep.
cannot guarantee that everything will run completely to plan. You'd hope that it would, but there will be one or two missteps that you may or may not even be aware of until the day after. It's just how you take it and just enjoy it in the moment.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What advice would you give to a couple right now who is debating between marriage or mortgage and what to prioritize?
I would say if you're able to be in a position where you can, you know, live together, potentially firstly,
Yeah.
just to see how things potentially plan out before you get married, I think that's just general good advice. I think
Yeah.
it makes sense to some extent. Where budget allows, I think a priority, in my honest opinion, is a house, in my honest
Yeah.
opinion. At the same time, if you're having a huge wedding and the spirit of community giving, it could balance things out and help towards your direction of the journey.
Yeah.
Or you've got a plan where you're saying, look, it's cool for me to get married now. This is how much it's going to cost, but my game plan to get a house is by X amount, for example, if that is what you want, by all means. But I think, again, there's not necessarily a right or wrong answer. I would say whatever works specifically for that relation, because
Yeah.
it's just worth having the conversation maybe in advance, working on a plan and looking at things perhaps not in a short term, but in a long term, looking at like, how does the next 3 years look? How does the next 5 years look?
Yeah.
And I think my advice is to always encourage long-term thinking, perhaps
Yeah.
more so than the short-term thinking.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's your advice?
I would say respect each other's views and just, it's such an exciting thing, whether it be a wedding or whether it be a home. They're both such important steps in the relationship that it's not worth kind of having too many arguments or ruining relationships over it, especially when it comes to
Yep.
things with in-laws. So if, for example, you really want to live together, but your in-laws don't want that and they're more traditionally inclined, it's just not worth ruining that relationship over,
Yep.
because the purpose is the combined effort of we want to start a new chapter, whatever that looks like, whether that's through getting married, whether that's through a house, and no one's going to remember. My mum always says this, that everyone's going to remember how you made them feel. They're not going to remember what happened. So in like you said, long-term thinking, 2 years time, not 2 years, 2 decades time,
Yep.
they will look back and think, oh, actually, yeah, we've fallen out, but I can't remember what it was that we fell out about.
Right.
But there was something that you did which upset me, and that's always going to stick with people.
Yep.
And it's just not worth ruining relationships, I don't think.
It's a nice way to end. Well, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.